So we're changing several things on my oldest baler that we don't do every year because you only have to do this every 45 to 55,000 bales depending on what kind of conditions you're in. But right now we're gonna rebuild the knotters on this one this year. It's got plenty of bales on it, and we weren't having any mistie issues, but things were starting to get a little loose to where it could happen. We could start having mistie issues, and I don't want that to happen. So we're really into preventative maintenance around this outfit, if you haven't figured that out by now. So basically what these are is we're putting new bearings. This is the old bearing. We're putting new bearings in the twine fingers because when these bearings start getting worn out, which actually these feel really, really good. This is number 6, it's my last one, but these actually feel really good compared to the old balers that we used to have. That these would go out probably around 40,000 bales. They'd be pretty rough. These ones feel really good. So what we're doing is we're putting those in because what will happen is if these bearings start to stick in any way, they'll cause, you'll have like all 6 of your strings break in one shot. I haven't had that happen ever since I've owned a 340 plus baler. So we're just doing this. Like I said, we're not in the worst of conditions. So I mean, you can get away with 50,000 bales on them. But some people, if you're in a little more sugar sand or something like that, something that's real fine, you might want to replace these every 45,000 bales or so. So that's what we're doing. And then we're going to go ahead and rebuild the knotters. And then we're going to do our yearly maintenance like we normally do. Like I do the 2 cam rollers for the tucker arm twine fingers on the cam up there on the left-hand side of the baler. Go through and do the stuffer brake. Basically everything you guys have seen in my previous videos that we do every year. As you can see, I've got a plate cut right here. This is for one of these 2 balers that I'm going to do for my 2017 and 2018. Basically what we're doing is I had a failure, not necessarily a failure, but it is a failure. So what happened on these, this one was 2 years ago. This broke, and it kind of broke the sidewall of the baler out, and we welded it up, and it's held ever since. I've had my other one is broke twice now, and it just, welding them, you can weld them up and they'll hold, but I thought I don't want to have to do this again. So we built plates that are going to go on here to where I can just weld that on, and then we're going to box in from the sides. We'll box in, and that'll give this a whole bunch more because there's nothing that'll catch here on either side. So you got a little bit of room that you can play with and get this figured out. We cut this out a little bit bigger because the other side of this lever, you have to get that to fit in there. But basically that'll make that extremely stout to where that won't break, because what happens is it'll break and kind of come down just a little bit, enough to where this roller will come off the cam and your crop holding fingers won't come out of the chamber all the way, and you'll break that shear bolt, and it'll break it immediately. As soon as that breaks and comes off the cam, first flake of hay, it'll break. So I did have this break on my 2018 this summer. We fixed it and finished baling the rest of the year, but I thought I'm just gonna go ahead and plate it up. So we built 2 plates. I haven't had this happen on my 2019. Haven't heard of anybody having this issue with 2019 and up. 2020 is obviously the Loop Master baler. They changed a little bit of the way that they prep these balers. I don't really see any more steel that they've added, but they're going through a different process on the way that they build these balers, and it's making this a little bit stronger. I don't know if it's heat or whatever they're doing, but we haven't had the issue on my 2019. So I'm not concerned about it, but if it ever happens, this is exactly what we'll do to fix it. Other than that, we're just kind of going through, doing our regular maintenance. We're gonna pull this header off and put this bearing in on the packer. I have replaced this bearing on both my other balers. My 2019 actually went out with like 3,000 bales on it. I don't know why, if it was just a faulty bearing or what, but the other one had like 30 or 35,000 bales on it when it finally went out. This one's 50,000 bales or what, it's been on here a while. I've never had an issue with this baler, so I'm going to go ahead and put that bearing on because I know it's probably on its way of failing, and I don't want to have to pull the header off in the middle of the summer. So we're just going to pull it off in here, put that bearing on, and get rid of that issue. Other than that, we're going to go ahead and put new plunger rails on. This is another thing that's 45 to 55,000 bales. You just kind of got to watch it, and you can hear it as well. And this one started clicking right towards the end, and you'll kind of hear it when you're idling your baler. If you've got hay in your baler, you'll kind of hear almost a knock sounding And that's every time your plunger hits the hay, it'll buck. Your plunger will buck just a little bit. And so we started hearing it, and I noticed they were starting to get wear on them. And I had it planned to go ahead and put new plunger rails in this year on this one anyways. But so we started hearing that, and that's your key sign. You're ready for plunger rails and new plunger rollers and all that. We do plunger rollers every 10,000 bales anyways. But we're putting new plunger rails. And then when we replace the plunger rails, we have to go in and reshim the plunger knives because they're probably going to be sitting just a little bit higher than they were before. I put new plunger knives on this baler last year, and you basically got to keep that. You got to pay a lot of attention when you're putting in plunger knives if you're not replacing plunger rails and plunger rollers and all that, because if you just stick the same shims back in with a new plunger knife, you may have a collision and you'll have a hell of a wreck. And if they're bucking, if they buck too much when you're hitting the hay, it can cause a collision with your plunger knives into your stationary knife. So that's one thing. I've never had that issue, but I don't want to have that issue. So we're replacing it to just make sure we don't have those issues, collisions with plunger knives with the stationary knife or anything like that. And just too much buck. You can start breaking these shafts that are on these plunger rollers. If it bucks too hard, it'll break. I've seen them break those, not on my balers, but I've seen other people's break. And it's just because there's too much slop. So basically keep the slop out of your balers, do your preventative maintenance, and you'll get tens and tens of thousands of bales out of them. Other than that, we're going through and putting new cam rollers and stuff on our headers. It's one thing I'd like to touch on. I've seen basically every manufacturer of baler have to tear into these headers a lot. Krone is extremely bad. There's a lot of speed there. They do have the camless pickup, which to a point is a good design, but there's so much speed. I've seen people have to tear them rotors out all the time. These, you know, if you keep your bearings, your cam followers in good shape, and change them every year, no matter the bale count you put on it, just put them on every year. Should make sure your bearings on your rotor is good on both sides, and you don't have to do basically anything but put tines in. I've never had to tear one of these out and do anything with them. I'm not saying it could happen. It definitely can happen, but I have yet to do it. And we put a lot of bales on all three of our balers. So just preventative maintenance. That's all I can preach to you guys, is just do your preventative maintenance. But after everything's all back together, we obviously go through and make sure everything's greased, make sure all our grease lines are in good shape, make sure everything is shimmed correctly, make sure all of our gaps, everything looks correct, and send it to the field for another 10,000 bales. But that's kind of what we're doing here. And we're gonna do 3 things this year that we haven't had to do in the past. The one is change all the bearings on the twine fingers up there, and the next thing's rebuilding the knotters, and the next thing's replacing plunger rails, and that's like in every 45 to 55,000 bale range type of deal. So that's all I got for you guys today.